Dawn, good morning, you two. How are you doing today?
Good morning.
Excellent.
Man, this is the most original and it's so unique type of podcast in the way that it's natural. You're not going in there trying to, yuck it up like radio disc jockeys. You're having an honest-to-God conversation.
Well, that's kind of what we've been doing since 2005. We met doing this show, and Paul's a Chicago native. We shot in Chicago. I was born there, but my parents moved when I was a baby, so he kind of helped me get to know the city. And we've just been chatting ever since, really.
Now, one of the things that listeners need to understand is that Prison Break was only on for 5 seasons, but yet that fan base, my God, it's still there.
It really is. That's one of the reasons we wanted to do the podcast, because you think you do a show, it's a hit, which was wonderful. And then you think, okay, this show's been off the air a couple of years. I'm sure the number of people contacting me about it or coming up to me to want to talk about it will dissipate. It didn't. If anything, it increased with the advent of, DVDs being everywhere. And then once it was on streaming, it just has exploded. I feel like, Sarah and I both have teenagers. People in their grades are watching it. My nieces are in their early 20s. They all watched it in high school. So it just is one of those shows that once it gets its hooks in you, people just love it. And it has just the most amazing fan base. So we really thought, we got a lot of things to share with them that they're going to like.
What makes it unique is the fact that you're watching the episode and you're explaining things as it's happening. I've never heard anything like this, and it's almost like I need a pair of those VR goggles because I want to watch you guys and really participate with it.
Oh, that's a great idea.
That's a totally crazy component that has never occurred to us. And look, the watch party is so much fun, right? Because you hit play on the watch party, you hit play on the episode, and it's a sort of DVD commentary kind of thing. Then we go on the episode of the podcast itself on Prison Breaking, and we talk about it, talk about what we just saw, and we bring on actors and directors and writers from the show. But it's just something that I think meant a lot to everybody involved. Mm-hmm. We have the writers on and they talk about it was a sort of mountaintop experience for them in the writer's room, and they all became really good friends and they're still so proud of that work. It changed all of our lives in so many ways. Paul and I, like you said, we've got teenagers now, and neither of us had kids when we started this show. I spent season 2 pregnant. And so I think because it was such a life changer. Yeah, Paul, but you did really well, actually.
Thank you.
You didn't gain much weight.
I didn't know. I carried it mostly in my legs.
Yeah. Well, we shot you, from that.
Right, that's
right.
So when you go back like that and you bring in the writers, first of all, I'm very proud of you for doing that, because a lot of viewers don't get to know the writers. And so when we hear their passion, their purpose, and their drive, man, that just makes the story more complete.
And this writer's room it's a really special group of people, as they talk about all the time. Usually writer's rooms have lots of turnover year to year. This one really had a core group of 4 or 5 people that stayed with it the whole time. They're still very close friends, and that kind of fun and camaraderie, it bleeds into the whole thing. So we also knew that, with a show that was so incredibly well plotted and had it was really the beginning of the more twists and turns per square inch than television had been doing before, that we needed to hear, how they came up with this. Was this planned? Did this come up last minute? Who's the insane person who came up with this idea? And so I think the audiences, the fans just will be blown away by hearing some of these stories about how this beast got built.
Wow.
Like, for instance, how on earth they got the name Teabag past the standards and practices people and landed it on television at a time when, Fox was run by Rupert Murdoch. It's fascinating to talk to them. And also, to give them credit, these are the writers that were a part of kind of bringing in some of the golden age of television, because people weren't serializing television like that until The Sopranos and Lost and 24 and Prison Break kind of made that really exciting.
But what's so interesting about you guys, the writers, the directors, and the producers, you lived in that age where you weren't introduced to streaming yet. And now that you're here, it's like a Beatles moment. 50 years later, we're still going to be watching this show.
Yeah, there's a lot of shows obviously that do well on streaming. Prison Break, I don't know what exactly it is. I think it's some combination of the storytelling being set in a prison at first and how intricately plotted it is, and something about the filmmaking. It's very cinematic. That you watch it, it's 18 years old or whatever. It does not seem dated. Like everyone's using flip phones. It doesn't bother you. And so there's something about it. It's like its own little graphic novel universe. And so I think that just translates generation after generation.
I think one of the things too is that what the show is about still resonates. I mean, it's a show about somebody who would do anything for family. And it's a show about what real loyalty looks like. And it's, look, there's violence in it. There's a lot of action in it, but it is sometimes at its heart a very sentimental show, and a show that says, good people have to stand up against terrible forces sometimes in order to do what's right. And I think that still resonates in an age that is increasingly cynical and increasingly bleak. I think that story really matters.
I can't be the only one who wants to be in row D at a movie theater with popcorn and candy watching this on a big screen, because I want to be able to look at the entire thing without the frame of a flat screen.
Totally agree.
Oh, interesting.
Totally agree. I love going to the movies.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, this has got that drama and that intenseness about it, and the quality is there. I would pay to go see 2 episodes a week if you guys were to bring back all 5 seasons.
Ooh, wouldn't that be great? A full theatrical release.
God.
Wow. What's interesting is actually the show could take it, by which I mean we shot it on film. And that's one of the things that we talk about is the ways in which the making of television has changed since 2005, and how we put this thing together, how the directors made certain choices about everything from location to tone, to the coloring of the frames. I mean, it's really beautiful to kind of dig into this kind of thing and see the choices that were made.
One of the things that really makes the podcast stand out is the fact that I love the way you guys pause. And comedians always talk about the pause. And so therefore, as you're pausing and listening to each other's questions, I mean, I just love the way that you give each other enough room to think about what you're about ready to say.
Yeah, one of the things that Sarah and I realized when we met and then remained friends is that we can really talk. We really like to talk. And we figured, well, let's talk and see how that ends up sounding. And it's an interesting point that you bring up, because at first we were like, should we cut some of these pauses out? It's getting a little, and we decided, no, that's how we sound. Let's see how that translates.
You guys have created your own countdown on this. That's interesting. Where did that twist come from?
Technical. It came from like a lot of creative decisions. It came out of a technical need. Paul's in Los Angeles and I'm in British Columbia, and in order for us to watch this thing together at exactly the same time, we have to count down. And now Paul's a musician, and so the first couple of times I would count it down, he's like, okay, but you're doing a pause between 3, 2, 1 and go. Yeah. He's like, it has to be the same amount of distance between 1 and go. And I was like, all right. So I've been working on my counting. There's math, Arrow, involved in this. There's actual math involved in our podcast, which I did not sign up for, but Paul's been very patient. And I think my counting's gotten better.
It reminds me so much of old FM radio, where at midnight on a Saturday night, they would play the full album. They would go 3, 2, 1. And it was like, here we go.
Get your tape deck ready.
So that's so true, dude. I did that. I'm sorry, but I did.
Oh yeah, me too.
Now, what have you learned from doing a podcast like this when you go back into the episodes? Do you see things that you didn't see before?
Oh my gosh. Sarah and I have both become directors subsequently. And at the time I had done some film acting. Sarah was a little newer than I was. And, the first few years you're a film actor, especially if you come from theater, you were really just trying to get to your mark and not get hit in the head by some kind of piece of heavy machinery. And then once you learn the ins and outs, technical ins and outs of filmmaking, that takes a little while. And then you learn about directing and all that stuff. So now, these years later, we can look at it and say, oh my gosh, how did they get this day? How did they shoot this all in one day? Look at that angle. What do you think they built there? Do you think they had to repaint that side of that building? All that technical stuff that we wouldn't have noticed at the time that went into making Prison Break the kind of cinematic experience that it is. We get to re-experience all that stuff, and we get to kind of use each other's eyes and knowledge to get into it, and that's been really educational, which is just kind of took me by surprise.
Not to mention watching these kids. I mean, what's been interesting is this show was really emotional for me on a lot of levels. I put it on a shelf when we were done. I don't think I could have taken it down in the first 10 years.
Yeah, same.
But now, when I watch this woman in her 20s named Sarah Wayne Callies perform this role, it doesn't feel like me.
Oh, really?
She's actually closer to the age of my eldest kid. And she is closer to my age now. And that way I can watch at more of a remove rather than just watching it and being like, oh, I don't like this, or being neurotic, or, there's a critical distance that I think allows for the space to appreciate what's there and to remember the best parts of the process.
Wow.
Yeah.
To go back like that reminds me so much of my studies with martial arts, because my sabanim would always say, I want you to learn from the sidelines, because when you watch it through other people, you become better at your craft. Do you feel like that you're better directors and better actors now that you've seen everything in the past?
Oh, 100%.
Yep.
Yeah. And, what's great about TV is that you have a different director every episode usually. So you get to see, you're making the same show every week, obviously, but you get different approaches, different attitudes, different techniques. And once you start paying attention to that, if you're an actor, you're around, you just get to learn by watching, which I think is the best way to learn.
Yeah. One of the things that you guys are honest with listeners about, very transparent, is talk to me about that subscription, because there's more than just a podcast here.
Yeah, that subscription is our watch party. Yeah. And so, the show is, the way we record it is we watch it together for the first time in 15 years or so. Mm-hmm. And you hear us in real time. I mean, because the show is so densely plotted. There's a lot of moments where the two of us are like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like,
the details of the back and forth, we just don't remember. We just don't remember there's so many twists per episode.
Or when they cut a guy's toes off at the end of the second episode, we sort of lost our minds. And so, for fans who want to tune into that watch party is a subscription service.
Yeah.
For people who just want to listen to us talk about the episode and don't want to rewatch it with us, that's all available wherever podcasts are available, on, iHeart and Apple and Spotify and all that stuff. And that's where we have our guests on, and get some of their perspectives too. We're talking to Marshall Allman on an episode we recorded this week that's later in the season. And he proposed to his girlfriend by jumping out of a plane over Thanksgiving break in season 1. It was that kind of a show where all of our lives were moving so quickly while the show was happening that we were changing as people.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we were, I don't quite know how to put this, but we were also getting a little famous, which changes you as a person. Yep. And we were on location for the first 3 years.
That's what I loved. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, we were really the only people that we had to process those changes with.
Yeah.
I spent more time during my pregnancy with Paul than I did with my mom, which is weird.
Wow.
But I was at work every day. Remember, I almost threw up on you once too. I had terrible morning sickness, and we were shooting on this train, and it kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then you had to choke me out. Yeah, and I almost barfed on your head.
Yeah, you did.
It was great. Sorry about that, by the way.
No, that's okay.
You have to love the friendship that has come from this because, I mean, there's no way that you could have predicted this.
No, and we've tried to kill each other a couple times on screen. We've both died a couple times on screen. I mean, there aren't that many friendships that survive multiple murder attempts and resurrection from the dead.
Go ahead.
No, please.
It bonds you when you go through these experiences, whether they're positive or negative. They are super intense, and especially on location. You're away from your family or away from your home. You build these set families, and this was a positive experience, but it was also it was a pressure cooker. The show was very challenging to make. Long hours, cold, hot, all those things. And then it was a bit of a rocket ship, as Sarah was saying. And, we very quickly, the show kind of was on the cover of magazines and winning awards. And so we all experienced that together. And that's really a bonding experience that in a lot of cases lasts for quite a while.
Wow. You guys have got to come back to the show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open. I love your collaboration, and I would love for you guys to work together even more and more on that flat screen.
Well, from your lips to God's ears. We'll we'll write something and direct it together.
There you go. Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Thanks, Ira. You take good care.
Great talking
to talk to you.